There's a moment when you realize that no one is coming to save you, that all the promises of support, all the reassurances, were nothing more than empty words floating in the wind. You've been abandoned, forgotten. But this moment, this breaking point, this is where most people fold. Most people crumble when the light they thought they had flickers out, leaving them standing alone in the dark. But you're not most people. This isn't a story about weakness. This is the story about what happens when you face the cold, unforgiving truth. The moment you stop expecting a hand to pull you up. The moment you decide to get up yourself. Because when there are no allies, there's no fear left. Just the raw, unfiltered drive to fight. You stand alone. But in that isolation, you find something stronger than anyone could ever offer you. This is where your true battle begins, and you're not backing down. Think about it. How many times were you told that someone would be there for you? That in your darkest moments, you wouldn't have to face the storm alone? It's almost funny how quickly people scatter the minute life gets hard. They vanish. One by one, they fade into the background, making excuses, saying they're too busy, or that things will get better. But here's the reality. No one owes you anything. You could scream your pain into the void, and it wouldn't make a difference. No one will come running. And when you're left standing in the ruins of what you thought you had, friends, family, allies, you come face to face with the hardest truth of all. You are on your own. Now, that might terrify some people. The thought of being completely alone in a world that is cold and indifferent. They panic, they beg, they plead. But you're built differently. You take that abandonment, that betrayal, and you transform it. It becomes fuel, a fire that burns hotter than any comfort anyone could offer. When you have no one to lean on, you stop looking for crutches, and suddenly, you realize that maybe you never needed them in the first place. The world showed you its true face, and now, it's your turn to show the world yours. And it won't be pretty. Let's be real, no one wants to be alone. It's in our nature to seek out companionship, to want to belong to something greater than ourselves. But what happens when those connections fail you? When the very people who were supposed to have your back are nowhere to be found? You accept that the world doesn't owe you anything. That's when you wake up. That's when you stop looking for allies and start becoming your own. When you fight, not because you have backup, but because there's no other option. There's a certain kind of darkness that swallows you when you're standing alone. It's not the kind you can see or even describe to someone who's never been there. It's heavy. It presses down on you, constricting your chest like a vice, making it hard to breathe. But in that suffocating stillness, you realize something. There's no one left to save you but yourself. Friends, gone. Family, silent. Mentors, nowhere to be found. This is the part where most people give up. This is where they fall to their knees, weeping about the unfairness of life, screaming at the sky, begging for someone, anyone, to help them. But here's the truth. No one's listening. No one's coming. The world is too busy moving forward, too wrapped up in its own chaos to care about the darkness you're in. And you have two choices. Let that fact destroy you, or let it light a fire so deep within you that no amount of darkness can ever put it out. Because here's the thing about being alone. It forces you to become someone you never knew you could be. People fear isolation because they think it makes them weak. They think standing alone means they've failed, that being surrounded by others is the only sign of success. But isolation is where real power is forged. It's where the pretenders fall away and the real ones rise. When you're surrounded by people, it's easy to believe in your own strength. It's easy to convince yourself that you're capable, that you're brave. But take away the noise, the validation, the backup, and suddenly you're exposed. Your weaknesses, your insecurities, they all come to the surface. The silence is deafening, and for the first time, you're forced to face yourself. That's where the real fight begins. Not against the world, but against the doubts in your own mind. Against the voice that tells you you're not enough. that without them, without allies, you're powerless. But that voice is a liar, and it's only in the stillness, in the isolation, that you learn to silence it. Fear thrives in numbers. It multiplies when you're surrounded by people who are just as terrified as you are. But alone, fear becomes manageable. It becomes something you can dissect, something you can control. When you're standing alone, there's no one else's panic to feed off of, no one else's insecurities to mirror. It's just you, your fears, and the decision to either let them consume you or to stand up and face them head on. Here's the truth most won't tell you. Fear doesn't go away when you have allies. It's just masked by their presence. But when you strip it all away, when it's just you in that dark room, you come face to face with it. And that's when you realize that fear isn't something to run from. It's something to master. You learn that fear is a tool. It sharpens you, makes you quicker, more aware. But it only works for you when you stop letting it control you. And standing alone forces you to take control. It forces you to stop being afraid of fear itself. Pain is inevitable. You can't fight it. You can't avoid it. Life will throw you into the fire whether you're ready or not. And when you're alone, it burns hotter than ever. There's no one to soften the blow, no one to share the weight. But pain, just like fear, is a weapon. If you learn how to wield it, pain breaks you down, that's its purpose. But it also gives you the chance to rebuild. And not just into who you were before, but into someone stronger, tougher, and more resilient. Pain is your greatest teacher, but only if you're willing to listen. Most people try to numb it, to escape it. They think if they ignore it long enough, it'll go away. But pain doesn't work like that. When you're standing alone in the dark, there's no escape. There's no distraction. The pain is raw, unfiltered, and relentless. But in that space, in that unbearable pressure, you learn to use it. You learn to channel it into something greater. You turn it into fuel, into the very thing that drives you forward when every part of you wants to give up. Pain can either be the chains that hold you down, or it can be the fire that propels you forward. You choose. Here's something no one tells you about standing alone. You're far stronger than you think, but you'll never know it until you're forced to fight on your own. It's easy to believe in strength when you've got others to lean on. It's easy to convince yourself you're capable when there's a safety net beneath you. But real strength? That comes when the net's gone, when there's no one to catch you. When you're alone, you stop waiting for someone to save you. You stop hoping that things will get easier. Instead, you learn how to adapt. You learn how to move forward, even when the odds are stacked against you. Every step you take, every battle you fight, it's all on you. And that's where the true strength lies. Not in the easy moments, but in the hardest ones. Strength isn't about how much you can lift or how fast you can run. It's about how much you can endure, how much you can take before you break. And when you're standing alone, you learn that your breaking point is much further than you ever imagined. The dark is where most people lose their way. It's where fear takes over, where doubt creeps in. But for you, it's different. You've been in the dark before. You've fought battles no one knows about. You've stood in the silence, alone, with nothing but your own thoughts. And now the darkness doesn't scare you. It's where you thrive. The thing about fighting in the dark is that no one sees you coming. The world has written you off. They think you've fallen, that you've disappeared. But that's their mistake. Because while they've been busy with their own lives, you've been preparing. You've been training. You've been turning that isolation, that loneliness into power. You're not the same person you were when you were surrounded by allies. You're stronger now, more dangerous. Because now, you don't fight for recognition. You don't fight for applause. You fight because there's no other option. You fight because that's who you are now, a warrior forged in solitude. One of the greatest lies we've been told is that we need others to validate our worth. That if no one sees us, no one applauds us, then what we do doesn't matter. But that's the farthest thing from the truth. Validation from others is fleeting. It's conditional. It disappears the moment you stop serving their interests. When you're alone, you stop seeking that validation. You stop needing approval from the outside world. You realize that the only person's opinion that matters is your own. The only validation you need is knowing that you stood up when no one else would, that you fought when everyone else ran. And in that realization, you find freedom. You stop chasing recognition and you start chasing purpose. You start living for something bigger than applause. You fight not for the crowd, but for yourself. Once you've done it, once you've fought in the dark with no allies, you become unbreakable. The world can throw whatever it wants at you. It can strip away everything you have, and you'll still stand. Because you've been through the worst of it. You faced the isolation, the fear, the pain, and you came out the other side. There's a quiet power that comes with knowing you don't need anyone else to survive, that you can fight and win on your own. It's a power most people will never experience because they're too afraid of the dark, too afraid of what it means to be truly alone. But you've embraced it. You've walked into the darkness with open eyes, and now there's nothing left to fear. Standing alone isn't a curse. It's a gift. It strips away the distractions, the noise, the false sense of security. It leaves you with nothing but the raw, unfiltered truth about who you are and what you're capable of. And once you face that truth, once you've fought in the dark with no one by your side, you become something else entirely. You become someone who no longer fears the world, someone who no longer needs allies to fight. You become a warrior, not because of the battles you fought with others, but because of the battles you fought alone. And when you stand in the light again, the world will see you differently. But by then, it won't matter. Because you won't need their approval. You won't need their support. You'll know deep down that you are enough. No allies, no fear. Only you. And that's all you've ever needed. By the way, if you want to level up in life, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.